Today we're watching how shopping at this mall killed 502 people by the YouTuber called Brew. And this is my first time watching one of his videos, so shall we get into it?
9th, 1995, 2 p.m. Socho District,
China!
Seoul, South Korea.
Whoops.
The Sampoong department store was, by any measure, having a good day. 40,000 shoppers moved through its 5 floors. Families drifted between clothing racks. Teenagers crowded the food court. Children pressed their hands against the glass display cases near the entrance. Unbeknownst to them, up above, on the 5th floor, the mall's top executives were having a meeting to decide their fate. The suits sat around a table in one of the management offices. Chairman Lee Jun and his son, the store's president, were presiding over the meeting. The building's cooling systems had been switched off roughly an hour earlier, and the hot air in the room had gone completely still. Spread across the table in front of them were maintenance logs, photographs, and handwritten warnings. Everyone presented their conflicting ideas of what to do with the situation at hand, but Chairman Lee Jun shut the conversation down, rose from the table, and delivered his instruction. The mall would stay open. The escalators would keep running, the employees would keep working, and most importantly, the happy shoppers would keep spending their money. Then, at 5:40 p.m., without a word to anyone, the executives walked out of the building to safety and left thousands of customers and employees to die. But the story does not begin with that meeting. It had been building since early that morning. Let's get into it. It's really quiet. At 8:05 a.m., the facility manager at Sampoong
that's way too dang, holy crap.
Department store unfolded a handwritten note from the night shift security guard. It said there was a loud cracking noise coming from the roof. The manager read it twice, then he folded the note, put it in his pocket, and went upstairs. At 10:02 a.m., he arrived at the food court, which spanned the entirety of the 5th floor, the top floor of the building.
No way.
By the time he got there, part of the restaurant area had already been closed to the public after staff noticed large cracks running around one of the main concrete columns that supported that floor.
Wait, how come there's cracks from hot air?
But the rest of the department store stayed open. The manager crouched down to get a closer look at the damage. Some of the cracks were wide enough to slide a finger into. He knew the building well enough to understand what he was looking at. The upper floors depended heavily on columns like this one to carry the load. If one of them started to fall, there was no telling what could happen. He then moved up to the roof and saw that the concrete had split in several places with long fractures cutting across the surface. Some areas had sunk lower than others. He worked his way back through the upper levels, speaking to maintenance staff and checking every area.
That's a massive building.
The crew had already moved heavy furniture away from the worst cracks, filed their reports, and put up caution tape to keep the damage out of view from customers. They wouldn't want to alarm them. This would be the first of many unfortunate choices made that day that would eventually result in a horrific tragedy, the likes of which the country had never seen.
Chills.
At 10:03 a.m., with the restaurant section still cordoned off, the rest of Sampoong opened as usual. But by midday,
is this like real footage from the is this real footage from the place? Because this is like a massive shopping center.
Still cordoned off, the rest of Sampoong opened as usual. But by midday, the problem was no longer confined to the upper floors. A deep bang echoed through the building loud enough that shoppers on the lower levels paused and looked around. Most assumed it was something being dropped and kept moving. Meanwhile, staff on the upper floors could feel a faint vibration underfoot. Looking up, they could see fine dust shaking loose from the ceilings above them. Management closed off additional sections above, but the sales floor below still looked entirely normal.
Wait, is this because the hot air was broken or what?
Customers kept moving through cosmetic counters and clothing racks. Most had no idea that the 5th floor was partially closed. The escalators were still running. The registers were still opening and shutting. Nothing raised any red flags. Even for the workers, like 18-year-old store employee Lee Sun-min, working what she planned to be her final shift before starting college that summer. Or like 19-year-old Yu Ji-hwan. For her, it was a normal day. She put on her nice shirt and went down to the basement level to start her shift in the home goods section, selling crystals. She had been working at this job for around 6 months. Except she heard a rumor that the 5th floor had sunken a bit. But since no one was being evacuated, she figured there was nothing to worry about, and instead just focused on getting through the day. At 12:30 p.m., the manager turned his attention to the roof equipment. He saw that the cracks had worsened since morning. The air conditioning units on the roof had been running all day. He ordered to shut them down. The hum that had run through the upper floors all morning went quiet, but it was far too late. The dust along the crack lines continued to fall. There was nothing anyone could do now to stop what was about to happen. On the 5th floor, heavy kitchen equipment like industrial ovens, massive room-sized refrigerators, and long cooking stations lined the
Oh my
restaurant. All of this
god.
was pressing down on a structure already strained by the weight on the rooftop. At 1:30 p.m., the manager went back up to the roof. The fractures had spread since his last visit. Several had widened. Fine concrete powder gathered along the edges of the splits where pieces of the roof were grinding against each other. This was the last warning sign for him. He picked up the phone and called his superiors directly, warning them that the building might be at risk. But the decision of what to do next was unfortunately not his to make. Perhaps if it had been, hundreds of lives could have been spared. At 2:00 p.m., the senior executives of Sampung Department Store gathered in a management office on the 5th floor for an emergency meeting. Reports were set across the table, maintenance logs, photos of the cracks, and notes from the facility manager. The air inside the room had gone still since the cooling units had been shut down.
Oh, that's the
making them
intro.
sweat. As they talked, they wondered why this could be happening. Back in 1987, when Lee Jun's company was constructing the structure that would later become this mall, the project had originally been approved as only a 4-story building for a different use. They decided to use the flat slab method to save money. It meant that the floors sat directly on columns without thick crossbeams or a strong steel frame to spread the weight. In that kind of design, there is no backup support, and every column has to be perfect. If one fails, the load has nowhere else to go.
Oh
But
my
halfway through
god,
construction, the owners made a major
no!
decision to convert it into a department store instead.
That's
That decision forced
terrible!
engineers to modify the design. An additional floor was added, and extensive modifications were made to the gray structure. The
Oh my
redesign pushed
god.
the total floor area from the originally intended 720,000 square feet to nearly 800,000. The building now had to support thousands of shoppers, restaurants, and heavy retail
Yeah.
equipment, far beyond what the original structure had been designed for. To make matters worse,
Literally, instead of closing the place and assessing the danger, they just kept going like, so frustrating.
these particular columns had been built smaller than the design required.
What?
The original blueprint specified columns 79 centimeters thick. However, during construction in 1988,
Oh my
that
God.
number was reduced by a quarter, down to 58
Of course they
centimeters, to cut
did.
construction costs. On top of that, the columns were spread out further than intended, nearly 11 meters apart from each other, as per Chairman Lee Jun's orders. More space between columns meant more room for shops, which meant more rental income. It also meant that each column was being asked to carry an enormous share of the building's total load, with no margin for error. Even though the changes pushed the building beyond its original load limits, the plan still received approval from the local government office in Seocho District, somehow. But there was resistance from the engineers themselves. Woosun Construction, the firm that was hired to construct the original design, refused to carry out the changes. Their engineers reviewed the new plans and told Lee Jun that the redesign
As they
posed
should.
serious structural risks. The modified building would not hold, they said. Lee dismissed them and brought in his own company to carry out the changes, including the addition of the
That's
5th
so
floor.
messed
The
up.
problems stacked up from there. Turning the building into a department store meant installing escalators on every floor. To do that, workers cut huge holes through each concrete slab. Every cut removed structural support from the floors. The building also ran into zoning issues. Structures of that
Ugh.
size were not supposed to operate entirely as department stores. Lee found a workaround. He ordered the addition of a skating rink on the brand new 5th floor. But later,
Wait, is this the Lotte Entertainment Building in Korea? I think I've been here before.
he changed his mind again. The skating rink never opened. Before long,
Oh.
it was converted into a cluster of restaurants, their kitchens heated by hot water pipes laid directly beneath the floor surface. This was another critical mistake, as the heavy kitchen equipment and the thick concrete required for the underfloor heating created a far greater weight burden than the skating rink ever would have. And just to make things even worse, the 5th floor had another design flaw. The columns on that floor did not line up with the columns beneath them. In a properly engineered
no.
structure, columns stack vertically so that weight travels in a straight line from the uppermost
Yeah.
floor down through every level to the foundation. In Sampung, the load transferred sideways through the concrete slab
That's
before
so
reaching the next
stupid.
column down, putting even more stress on
What
the
is
columns
that?
and floor.
Are you like stupid? Who does that? Who gave them that job? Dude, in Minecraft, if you put the columns in the wrong location, you think it's gonna stay up straight. When I build a building in Minecraft, my columns are straight. I don't build them no sideways. What is this hooligan ass architecture? I'll have you know, I studied architecture and design at university. This is stupid. You can take it from me, Miwo. I certify this building is stupid. It's stupid!
The 5th level. Despite all these reckless changes, the building still made it through approval and opened to the public in 1990. And the answer to how it got away with all the violations lies in the timing. South Korea in the late 1980s was building fast. The economy was booming. Cities were expanding. New businesses were opening.
Holy
and
crap,
malls
that's
were
like
suddenly
super
everywhere.
fast.
Then came the 1988 Olympics in Seoul.
Oh my
Hosting
god.
the games meant massive projects
Swarms.
everywhere. Stadiums, hotels, roads, and shopping centers for tourists. Deadlines were tight, and projects piled on top of each other. In favor
That's
of rapid
why it
development,
paused.
building codes were often poorly enforced. Inspections were rushed, and violations were brushed off just so projects could be finished on schedule. Cutting corners was being rewarded. Still, the mall stood with no impeding signs of danger for 5 straight years. So
5
what was
years!
causing the cracks to appear now?
But you know who doesn't cut corners?
But you know who hey, that's my line. Oh, not another one. Bro!
Yes?
No, not you, Deja Brews. I meant the original, never
Deja
mind.
Brews.
Just don't take my lines, alright? It's not cool.
You know what's also not cool? Receiving a workplace injury due to negligence of another party.
Stop turning what I say into segues. Listen,
What?
Brew, I know you're new here,
Oh my god, is this an ExpressVPN ad? Why does he remind me of the ExpressVPN logo?
there's a reason why I do the sponsor segments, okay? It's because
Just like there's a reason why Morgan & Morgan, this video's
What?
sponsor, is America's largest injury law firm.
they
No
have 1,000
way.
attorneys and more than 100 offices nationwide.
They've recovered $30 billion for their clients. And
They've been fighting
Wow.
for people for over 35 years like an army of lawyers ready to battle it out.
they're for the people, protecting those defenseless against
Why is their law firm called Morgan and Morgan?
powerful interests. So if you get injured because of someone else's negligence, you deserve to be paid. And guess what?
The fee is free unless they win, and that's what makes them so great.
For more information, you can go to forthepeople.com/brew.
Really? Oh my god, wow. That's a massive sponsor.
Okay, if you're quite done
Wow.
taking my job, well, let's get back to our regularly scheduled programming where those mall owners were cutting corners and getting
Yeah.
away with it. But I bet not for long. And as for you, new guy, let's go get you some coffee, okay? Is there like a brew dispenser that I don't know about?
Oh no, you know him.
Back in the meeting, one executive recalled the relocation of the giant air conditioning units from 2 years ago. Not only did the units add additional weight, but residents in nearby apartments had complained about loud noise on the roof. So the management decided to move them away from the apartments, but they chose the cheaper option. Instead of hiring a crane again to lift the heavy equipment safely, workers dragged the units across the
Oh.
roof over the concrete surface. Those units weighed
Bruh.
over 36 tons. The large tanks
Bro.
alongside them held roughly 87 tons of coolant. That is equivalent to 30 adult elephants being dragged across a
What?
concrete roof. The massive weight gouged the surface and left cracks in several places. When the air conditioning units were powered on again, they vibrated constantly. The vibrations traveled through the damaged roof, down through the mismatched and undersized columns, and into the rest of the structure. One column in particular took the worst of it. Column 5E on the 5th floor. That was
Oh,
the
I
column
see
the facility
now.
manager had been looking at since 8:05 that morning. The damage had been building for years.
It happened in the same day? Oh my god.
At 4:00 p.m., the facility manager came rushing into the meeting with an update. His face was pale as he reported that the cracks around column 5E had widened to 4 inches since his first inspection that morning. The structural engineer who had led the completion of the mall's construction was in the room. After hearing the facility manager's report, he immediately advised the entire store be closed without any delay.
Yeah.
But Chairman Lee Jun refused to consider his warning. The crowd that day was unusually large and, therefore,
Are you
more profitable.
serious?
By 5:00 p.m., workers on the 5th floor could see the ceiling visibly sinking.
Oh
They
my
cleared out the
god.
remaining area on that level, leaving the 5th floor closed off entirely. 4 floors
Dude.
below, the sales floor stayed open, business as usual. Stores were busy, but after over 4 hours of no air conditioning, the heat in the building was starting to get to people. Staff like Park Sung-yun, a 19-year-old shop assistant, were starting to sweat through their uniforms. When she
My
asked
God.
management about the AC, they told her it wasn't working, but would be fixed soon, and advised her to just continue with her work. Because the heat wasn't stopping shoppers like Lee Gun-suk. She was a 44-year-old housewife who had stepped out that afternoon with a neighbor to buy groceries for dinner. Sampung was
Oh,
near her
no.
apartment building, and when she entered the supermarket on the mall's ground floor, apart from the heat, nothing seemed off. But up above, more loud bangs came from the 5th floor ceiling
my
as
God.
the roof cracked further. To Lee Sun-min, It sounded like a huge explosion. By 5:40 p.m., the executives quietly gathered their things and left the building as the upper floors continued to groan and pop under the weight above. More and more fine concrete dust drifted down from the cracks. Several thousand people were still inside the building, shopping,
That's crazy.
eating in the basement food court, and moving between
In the
floors on
basement.
escalators. First-year university student Choi Myung-suk had spent the afternoon working in the children's shoe section. At around 5:45 p.m., he went down to the basement to grab something to eat. 18-year-old Lee Sun-min was still on her shift on the first basement floor when a coworker called her over to the other wing of the store. She started to head there and entered the passageway connecting the wings. Meanwhile, 19-year-old Yoo Ji-hwan was still selling crystal in the basement when she heard a loud bang. Everything shook like an earthquake and then went silent. A moment later, at 5:52 p.m., a deep fracture tore through the structure from above.
No!
The roof gave way first, overloading the
Oh,
fifth floor,
fuck.
which consequently dropped into the fourth, and the force kept punching down.
Oh my
Floor after
God.
floor, collapsing into the basement in under 20 seconds. Lights cut out
20 seconds? The executives left 12 minutes before it happened? No way.
as escalators twisted, and a wall of pulverized concrete and dust rushed through the building so fast that most people did not understand what was happening until they were already under the rubble. And just like that, almost 1,500 people were trapped in an instant. For Yoo Ji-hwan, everything went pitch black. She was trapped
she
in the
died
rubble,
instantly.
shaped like a
Oh no,
dome
she didn't.
above her. She tried yelling for help, but all she got was silence in response.
She's alive though,
Concrete
right?
dust and smoke filled her lungs with every breath. The darkness was so complete that Lee Sun-min couldn't see her own hands in front of her. Seconds after the impact, a violent pressure wave moved through the broken structure, carrying debris and sound and a heat she could not explain. When it finally stopped, she could hear screaming from somewhere above her and from somewhere below. Every staircase in the north wing was filled with rubble, leaving her no way out. Rescue crews reached the site within minutes of the collapse, digging into the rubble with bare hands and whatever tools they had with them. They couldn't use their heavy equipment without the risk of harming potential survivors. The scale of what they were faced with was immediately...
Holy crap! Dude! Damn, dude! What about the people on the other side of the building, dude? Fuck!
The south wing had collapsed completely, leaving the north wing standing alone like a 5-story jagged cliff. This remaining structure was visibly unstable. Seoul Mayor Choi Pyong-yeol, the city official responsible for coordinating this emergency response, faced a decision that had no good answer. Another partial collapse could kill rescuers working inside. He ordered parts of the rescue operation suspended. Expectedly, families and friends of people still trapped inside erupted in protest outside the site. Demonstrations formed in the thousands. They refused to accept the decision, and they made enough noise that the authorities could not ignore them. The collapse had also reached beyond the building itself. Cars in the underground garage had been crushed under the falling structure. The shock had cracked the walls of nearby apartment buildings and caused damage to hundreds of surrounding businesses. The scale of what had happened was becoming visible block by block. Faced with public pressure, Mayor Choi and city officials gave in. The rescue continued. Engineers were called in to stabilize the still standing ruins with guy cables, tying sections of the building to prevent further collapse. Slowly, carefully, rescuers went back in, determined to save as many people trapped under the rubble as possible. Unfortunately, the operation was disorganized. It took authorities close to an hour to establish a coordinated disaster response. Police failed to set up adequate barriers around the site, allowing civilians and reporters to move freely through the rubble. Making it harder for emergency crews to reach those still trapped, and harder still to hear anything beneath the noise. Back in the basement, Lee Sun-min was physically unharmed, but every exit was sealed. She had no choice but to just sit in complete darkness.
Well, at least she's alive, though.
Breathing dust, listening to the sounds of the ruins settling around her, with no way to know whether anyone was coming or if the rumble around her might cave in at any moment. On another level, near an escalator by the central hall, Choi Myung-suk had made it through the initial collapse with his life intact. In the pitch darkness around him, he could hear 2 women nearby. Both were badly hurt. Neither could see him, and he couldn't see them. The first woman was a 25-year-old store employee. Though they couldn't see each other, they tried to encourage one another. But Choi could hear her voice weakening with every word. Eventually, she stopped speaking. The other voice was older, heavy with grief. She called
Chat. It's not good. I ate all the popcorn. We're only 17 minutes into the video. We have 10 minutes left without popcorn. I'm a chud. I'm just a chud. Fuck.
Called desperately for her children. Her voice trembled from both fear and the pain of serious injuries. Joy heard her frantic pleas for hours until she too stopped. Outside, through the night of June 29th and into the following day, rescuers began using cranes and heavy machinery with caution, lifting massive slabs of concrete and steel and setting them aside piece by piece. And even after over a day of non-stop work, the site looked almost unchanged from above. The same
just because it's 5 stories.
The same rising dust. The same crews moving carefully across surfaces that were still not fully stable. Then, at 8:57 p.m. on July 1st, a full 2 days after the collapse, the first trapped survivors were found. Rescuers reached a basement dressing room and it remained mostly intact. 24 cleaning staff were pulled out alive. That same evening, crews broke through to the section of the basement where Lee Sun-min had been trapped and brought her out alongside another survivor. However, the situation after those 3 days grew darker. 3 days is the maximum that most people can survive without water in hot weather.
Yeah, it's really hot.
Covered now. And so, the mission shifted. The heavy equipment would now be used more aggressively to clear out the remaining debris, since they believed there was no one left alive to be harmed underneath. But they were wrong. On day 4, the sounds of the machinery working above were the first things Yu Ji-hwan could remember hearing after the collapse. For the past 4 days, her mind had been fighting with itself. Sometimes she felt like she could survive this, but other days she believed she was going to die. When it rained, she tried to drink the water, but it tasted like rust. But then, the pressure from the heavy equipment above made the rubble around her legs collapse onto them. Pain coursed. As time went, the rubble above her started to sink closer and closer to her. She feared for her life, and she feared that her mother would never know what happened to her. 6 more days passed without a living person found. Officials began shifting the operation from rescue to recovery. Many on site were sure no one else could possibly still be alive. But in the dark beneath the rubble, Choi found rainwater pooling in the concrete around him. He drank it to keep himself alive in hopes that someone would find him before it was too late. Then, 9.5 days after the collapse, at around 9 a.m. on July 9th, a construction crew could not believe it as they pulled Choi alive from the wreckage. 1 day later, Yu Ji-hwan, still alive, could hear the workers' radios. They called out asking if someone was there. She screamed to them, but they didn't hear her. So she banged on the rubble. The chatter turned to excitement as they confirmed someone was alive. She saw the hole opening and felt the relief that she would be able to tell her mother what had happened to herself. They pulled her out, and she was rushed to the hospital.
Oh, thank gosh.
These rescues were miracles in their own right, and they didn't expect to find anyone else after that, especially not 17 days after the building fell.
17 days!
Found 19-year-old Park Seung-hyun alive. She thought only 5 days had passed and asked for water. With only a scratch on her leg, the doctors believed she survived so long because she was semi-conscious and may have drunk rainwater to sustain herself. She just didn't remember. She was the last survivor found alive in the wreckage. By then, the search had stretched on for more than 2 weeks. After that, the operation recovered only the dead. When it finally ended, 502 people were dead. 502 lives. Workers, shoppers, parents, children crushed beneath a building that never should have been allowed to stand in the first place. It took the government 20 days to officially designate the Sampung site a special disaster zone, which finally unlocked emergency funding, resources, and legal authority for rescue operations. But by that time, there was no one alive to rescue. 9 days after that...
Is that a hamster? Is that a hamster? Sorry, I can't stop looking at it. Look at it. Is that a hamster?
There was no one alive to rescue.
Look at it. Its legs are moving. It's moving.
The National Assembly formed a special investigation committee to determine what caused the collapse and who was responsible. Korean lawmakers had already been hearing theories. Earlier that year, 2 gas explosions had struck other parts of Seoul, so some pointed to a similar cause here. Others suggested an act of terrorism, raising the possibility of North Korean
it's just stupidity.
But investigators quickly ruled both theories out. Fires in the rubble came from the gasoline of crushed cars in the underground garage, and the footage of the collapse showed the building fell straight down, not outwards, proving there was no explosion. The focus soon turned to an investigation into the mall's construction. The evidence was not difficult to find. Columns were undersized, rebar was insufficient, escalator holes had been cut through the structural slabs. The building had been carrying far more weight than it was ever designed to hold, on a structure
Yeah.
that had been altered, overloaded, and inadequately inspected from the moment it was built. The day after the collapse, Chairman Lee Jun and his son Lee Han-sang, who was the store's president, were arrested. Their photographs
Yes!
circulated on every Korean news channel for days. They became, in a very short period, two of the most infamous people in the country. Yet,
Good.
even after being detained, Lee Jun showed almost no remorse. In interviews, he said almost nothing about the
What?
debt. He only expressed concern for how much money he lost. Lee Jun
Are you
was charged with
serious?
negligent homicide for the consequences of his reckless actions. Prosecutors also traced the disaster back to a wider web of corruption, arguing that bribed
my
officials had
gosh.
helped illegal design changes pass the inspection.
Yeah.
As a result, Lee Jun was also charged with bribery. Prosecutors
Yeah.
saw a 20-year sentence. Eventually, he would be
Longer.
convicted of criminal negligence and sentenced to 10 years
What?
and 6 months in prison.
Only 10 years and 6 months. His actions killed 502 people. That is like actually unacceptable. Nah, that's really messed up, dude. That's crazy.
On appeal, that sentence was reduced to 7 years and 6 months.
Wow.
Meanwhile, his son, Han Sang-lee, was jailed for 7 years for corruption and accidental homicide.
Wow.
Part of the Seocho local government approval system was found to be corrupt. City officials were also punished for illegally approving the building's designs. Lee Chung-woo, a district administrator connected to the area, received 3 years in prison for bribery. Former Seocho ward chief Hwang
Only
Cheol-min
3 years.
is also convicted of taking bribes and received a 10-year sentence. But for most
Bruh.
South Koreans, the punishments still felt painfully small compared with the scale of
Exactly.
the disaster. A month
Yeah.
after the collapse, with bodies still being identified and families still searching for the missing, the Lee family
Oh my god, you can literally. So this is like the father and the son. The son actually like is bowing his head in respect, right? Like a little bit of respect. I don't know how much like guilt this guy feels. But you see the dad here, he's just looking deadpan straight ahead, like, whatever, that just happened. Like, are you for real, dude? What is wrong with these people? This really upsets me. I hate stuff like this. If I was smarter, I would have become a politician, but I'm not, so I'm a commentator.
their entire wealth as compensation to the victims. For many of the bereaved,
Wait, hold on. Let me go back. I didn't catch the message.
punishments still felt painfully small compared with the scale of the disaster. A month after the collapse, with bodies still being identified and families still searching for the missing, the Lee family offered their entire wealth as compensation to the victims. For many of the bereaved, even this
That's
did not
not
come
enough.
close to feeling like
Yeah.
justice. Lee Han-sang, Lee Jun's son and the president of the Sampung Mall, left the business world entirely after his release and
Good.
became a Christian evangelist in Mongolia. Lee
Did he join a cult? Edwin, did the son join a cult?
business world entirely after his release and became a Christian evangelist in Mongolia.
A Christian evangelist. What is a Christian evangelist, chat? YouTube, what is a Christian evangelist YouTube chat? Will you let me know in the comments?
Lee Jun did not live long after leaving prison. He
Good.
died on October 4th, 2003. after
Yeah,
suffering from
fuck that
diabetes,
guy.
high blood pressure, and kidney disease. He
Good.
only served roughly half his already reduced
What?
sentence. Most importantly, the collapse
4
forced changes that
years?
extended far beyond the Sampung Group. In the months that followed, South Korea introduced new disaster
Oh my
management laws
God.
that began building a more centralized emergency response system. And when the investigators looked more broadly at the country's building stock, they found that 14% of high-rise structures were deemed unsafe, 84% required repair, and only 2% fully
Whoa.
met safety standards.
That's
Sampung was merely
crazy.
a visible consequence of a rotted system infected with bribery and negligence. The site itself was
Bruh.
eventually cleared and redeveloped. A luxury apartment complex now stands where the department store once did.
Wow.
In the end, Sampung was not a freak accident. It was the final consequence of greed at every stage of the building's life. In
Yeah.
its design, its construction, its illegal modifications, and finally, in the decision to not evacuate when the danger was impossible to
Yeah.
ignore.
They literally had the chance to save these people and they still stayed. And the executives just quietly left the building like nothing happened is nuts to me.
502 people died because one man put profit ahead of human life for years.
It's insane,
Another
dude.
937 barely made it out alive and were forced
Yeah.
to live on with a horrifying trauma. 30 years is a long time, long enough for a collapsed department store to be replaced by a luxury apartment complex. But the people of South Korea still haven't moved on from the tragedy that unfolded on June
Don't
29,
blame 'em.
1995. Choi Myung-suk, Yoo Ji-hwan, and Park Sung-hyun later came to be known as the last survivors. All
That's
three buried what happened
crazy.
to them for the rest of their lives. Yoo Ji-hwan
Yeah.
spent nearly a decade afraid to use the subway, haunted by
Oh
the
my
memory of being
God.
trapped underground. Choi Myung-suk struggled with nightmares and sleepless nights, replaying
Oh,
screams and falling
no.
concrete. Yet over time, he eventually returned to working life and directed his career toward construction safety. Along with Park
Okay, that's
Sung-hyun,
nice.
these final survivors formed a bond that would last a lifetime, connected by the memory of what almost ended them and how, by a miracle, they still got out alive. But not everyone
Yeah.
found closure. Families like that of Lee Gyun-suk never learned her fate. Her family filed missing person reports in the weeks that followed and contacted every available agency, but no answers ever came. For them, and so many other families, June 29, 1995 remains an open wound. Every year, on the anniversary, families gather
Oh my
at a memorial
God.
tower and honor the memories of the lost
Damn.
loved ones. Recently,
You know, that's not even that like long ago. How long ago was 1995? 2005, 2015, 2025. That's like 30 years. It's only been 30 years since the incident. That's not long. That's like not that long ago, chat. That's crazy. It happened so fast as well.
the dead were remembered on the 30th anniversary in 2025 at the Sampung Disaster Memorial Tower in Mahun Citizens Forest, where bereaved families gathered and laid out 502 pink pinwheels across the ground, one for each person who did not come home.
Damn.
If you found this video interesting and would like to help get it noticed by the algorithm, hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Another way you can help is by checking out another one of our videos, like this one. Speaking of support, thank you to our top-tier
Kit Kat
members,
eyes.
Nexus and Xander, as well as our other generous members at stack.com/brew for helping keep this channel going.
That's pretty cool. That was cool. I like that video. Did you guys like that video? Do you like these kind of videos? I really like these kind of videos. I feel so like big brain. Like I've learned a lot. And I will do my best to retain this information. And I will probably forget, but I like these kind of videos a lot. They're like cautionary tales. Yeah, I like them. I feel like they're super cool and stuff. Yeah. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. My name is Miwo, and I hope you like and subscribe to my video, to my channel. Leave a comment below. And today's word of the day is caution. Tell me something that you learned from this video, or like something that you want to share as like a cautionary tale about to other people in the chat. Okay, I'll see you very, very soon. Bye.